Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today we are doing something different. We are talking about the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 that was recently signed into law by President Joe Biden. So on August 7th, the Senate had a session which lasted about 16 hours, and there were amendments that were made to the bill that was going through the US Congress. And finally, you had all Republicans who voted against the Inflation Reduction Act and all Democrats who voted for the bill. So it was a 50-50, and that caused a tie. Vice President Kamala Harris had to step in and break that tie, and she voted for the bill. And on August 12th, the bill was passed by Congress, and again you had 220 Democrats who voted for the bill, and all Republicans, that's 207 of them, voted against the bill. On August 16th, 2022, the bill was signed into law by US President Joe Biden. Now, what are the provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022? Well, the law is estimated to raise revenue from prescription drug price reform to lower prices, including Medicare negotiation of drug prices for certain drugs. That is expected to raise revenue of about 265 billion. Next, you have imposing a selective 15% corporate minimum tax rate for companies with higher than $1 billion of annual financial statement income. That will raise about 222 billion US dollars. Next, we have increased tax enforcement, which will raise about 203.7 billion dollars. That is where the IRS, which has been complaining for many years that they are understaffed, so they will get to hire more people, and of course that will increase the efficiency of tax collection, and that will raise about 203.7 billion US dollars. Next, we have imposing a 1% excise tax on stock buybacks, which is expected to raise about 74 billion US dollars. So I believe the stock buybacks is what would typically happen with companies, I think, like Tesla and especially Apple, where when the company has a bumper, year where they have so much cash on hand, they use this money to buy back their own stock, and what that does is it bumps up the value of the stock of the company, and also raises the value of the company as a whole. So that will be taxed going forward. Now, the provisions for this Inflation Reduction Act say that this money that will be generated will be spent on one of the first things they will do is addressing domestic energy security and climate change, 369 billion. So that is a lot of money, and that is where you would have tax credits for electric vehicles, and also pushing those manufacturers of EVs to manufacture more of their vehicles and the battery, and also mining for components that go into the battery right here in the United States, and if not in North America. Next, you have deficit reduction, which will be 300 billion. That would go towards paying the debt of the United States, because every year it's like when they do the budget, they always run a deficit, and that the last time that the US had a balanced budget, I think, was under the administration of former President Bill Clinton, which is way in the early 90s. Next, we have continuing for 3 more years the expansion of Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, subsidies, originally expanded under the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, and that will cost 64 billion US dollars. Next, you have funding for drought resiliency in western states, $4 billion. Everybody by now must have heard of Lake Mead, which is the lifeline of most of California and some Mexican states, Nevada, Arizona. All those areas are seriously affected because the water level in Lake Mead has dropped to historic levels. So all of that is bringing a lot of hardship. You also have the wildfires that will that erupt every so often in the western states, and that affects a lot of the livelihood of farmers and even people living out west. So drought resiliency in western states will be combated by these $4 billion US to make the areas more livable. And finally, increased funding for the IRS for modernization and increased tax enforcement, $80 billion. So that is where the money will be going. So you guys can see almost half of it is going towards addressing domestic energy security and climate change. So energy security, that would be for things like upgrading the grid and also reducing the dependency of US citizens on foreign oil and foreign petroleum products. So that is where a huge chunk of this money is going. So that is what some of the basic provisions, without going too much into depth, for the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. And then it continues: as part of the investment into clean energy, the law extended the solar investment tax credit for another 10 years. The law contains provisions that cap insulin costs at $35 per month and will cap out-of-pocket drug costs at $2,000 for people on Medicare. Several provisions in the initial deal between Schumer and Manchin, Manchin is the senator from West Virginia, were changed after negotiations with Senator Sinema. I think Sinema, she's from Arizona. A provision narrowing the carried interest loophole was dropped. A 1% excise tax on stock buybacks was added. Manufacturing exceptions were added to the corporate minimum tax, and funding for drought relief for western states was added. So in a nutshell, this is what that bill would do. So it forces the major corporations to pay a little bit more tax. It adds to the IRS so they can recruit more people for enhanced tax recovery, and also it gives credit for people who buy electric vehicles, and also gives credit to the manufacturers so that it entices them to bring a lot of their manufacturing capability to the United States, and if not, to North America. And finally, of course, I think this happened because the level of Lake Mead kept dropping even as they were negotiating on this bill. So finally they were able to add drought relief for western states into the bill before it was finally signed into law by President Joe Biden on the 16th of August 2022. So I just thought that you guys might be interested to know some of the provisions of the bill. Thank you for your time. Don't forget, smash that like button and also subscribe to the channel. Bye now.